Yeah.
Oh,
It
excuse
always,
me, one more. Oh,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
Lama, I'm sorry. One more quick thing. So we, if anyone here would like to donate towards Lama Adam's teaching this evening, you can do so by going to our website, which is santamonicakTC.com, and you can donate through the website or through the newsletter or through the announcement that we sent out today, that you got in your email. So just wanted to make note of that as well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's funny. I always think I'm going to be tired, but I'm always excited to see all of you. So like, I always get like a burst of energy when it's this time of night. So I want to, this is something I've been wanting to do for a while. And this is like, I think the exactly the right kind of group to do it with, is to explore the 3 stages of practice: listening, contemplating, and meditating together, like in conversation with the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma. So, and I think that's actually a great way to tackle this topic of balancing practice and study. So that's what I'd like to spend our time with. We may not get through all 4 of these, but I would love to kind of introduce the topic, and then if we could have some conversation about it, doubts or questions or thoughts, that they don't even have to be your own thoughts, maybe things you've heard that were impactful. Like, let's really kind of examine these ideas together and then spend some time meditating. So I'd actually like to start tonight. I know this is breaking a little tradition, but when Lama Karma was with us, and I realized this happens at a lot of other teachings too, we did the Mahamudra lineage prayer rather than the refuge prayer. And I'd kind of like to do that instead. So I'm going to pull that up on the screen. Oh, that's not it. Where is it? Is that it? Can you guys see it? No?
Not yet, Lama Adam. Yes, it just says you started. Oh, here we go. Now it works.
Okay, good. Okay, so we'll chant this together in English. Great Vajradhara, Talopa, Naropa, and Marpa, Milarepa, Lord of Dharma Gampopa, knower of the 3 times, omniscient Karmapa, lineage holders of the 4 great and 8 lesser schools, Drikung, Taklung, Salpa, Glorious Drukpa, and others. You who have mastered the profound path of Mahamudra, the Khenpo Kagyu, unrivaled protectors of sentient beings, I pray to you, Kagyu Lamas, grant your blessing that I may follow your tradition and example. As is taught, detachment is the foot of meditation. Attachment to food and wealth disappears. To the meditator who give up the ties to this life, grant your blessing that attachment to ownership and honor cease. As is taught, devotion is the head of meditation. The Lama opens the door to the profound oral teachings. To the meditator who always turns to him, grant your blessing that uncontrived devotion be born within. As is taught, unwavering attention is the body of meditation. Whatever arises is the fresh nature of thought. To the meditator who rests there in naturalness, grant your blessing that meditation be free from intellectualization. As is taught, the essence of thought constructed play of the mind. Grant your blessing that the inseparability of samsara and nirvana be realized. Through all my births, may I not be separated from the perfect Lama and so enjoy the glory of the Dharma. May I completely accomplish the qualities of the path and stages and quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. And I'll say a short prayer of my own. Paden sawe lama rinpoche daki chiwo pede denjula kadrin chenpo gone jizunte kusun toki ngajub saldu so. Okay. I have so many like stories. Like I feel like it's been like a month. I want to tell you guys all these stories, but we got to do a teaching. So I just remembered over the weekend I taught another Zoom session for another center, and I was doing the refuge prayer. Or no, I was doing that prayer that I just did, which is a prayer to the guru, kind of to grant blessings of body, speech, and mind. And I realized I was chanting the meal prayer. So, I was doing it in Tibetan. So of course, like I didn't realize till the end, like, why am I saying Rinpoche so many times? Like, oh, it's the meal prayer. Oh, oops. But and then I guess the only other little anecdote I'll tell is like I had the opportunity this past week to do a retreat at home, and I haven't been able to do that, or haven't found the time or made the time to do it since I finished the 3-year retreat, and kind of forgot how great it is. So I want to put a plug in for making some time, whether it's an afternoon or a day or a couple days, to use your own home for some retreat. It was wonderful, and I made the point of making it a silent retreat. It wasn't particularly strict. I had some work I had to do. I still did that between sessions, but I set up my 4 sessions, and I did not speak for those 3 days, and did the things I needed to do between my sessions, but in general tried to keep all conceptuality to a minimum, even within that framework. And I think that's okay. I mean, there's lots of really strict ways we can practice, and those are great. I think the more discipline we can put on ourselves in those retreats, the better. But we also have to find a balance with our regular daily life. And I think it's always better if we try to do something like that, even if we have to do our regular things a little bit too. So it was really wonderful. I forgot how much, even in like a morning of not speaking, how much clearer the mental chatter becomes, and how much more apparent the things going on again and again in our mind become, just from not verbally speaking. And it's not, I think once you've been a meditator for a while, that doesn't have to be overwhelming or distasteful. It's actually kind of nice to hear it, and then have something to put your attention on, whether it's mantra or a practice or something to mindfully use that voice or conceptuality in a way that generates virtue. So I just wanted to mention that because it was a really nice weekend. So I'll just briefly say about this. We call this the 3 stages of practice. And I read over Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's teaching on this in Excellent at the beginning, before we started today. And so to just recap a little bit of what he said about it, he made the point of mentioning that we all have this potential of limitless qualities. And he said this potential is naturally present in each of us, but we need a method in order to first recognize it, then understand it, and finally to develop it fully. So this method that he talks about here is this method of listening, contemplating, and then meditating. And he used the analogy of kind of like if somebody told you something that you could cook, and then they told you how to cook it, then you have to actually cook it. And that was because I think a lot of times people get confused confuse contemplation and meditation, or there's just a little ambiguity about if those are the same thing, or we're doing something different there. And so I want to make clear that, like, with the listening part, openness is kind of the key, like just being open to information. Khenpo Rinpoche said this is not a blind faith thing. We don't have to necessarily like get fully on board with everything we're hearing right away. We're just opening up to the information. And that alone is kind of a practice. And I think one of the ways a lot of us may have noticed that is going to teachings with Tibetan speaking teachers, and recognizing in those breaks when there's translation, or if someone, I know a lot of our teachers can speak much slower than I'm able to. So there's a lot of breaks, I think, where our mind wanders off. So just being able to be present in the moment and be open to information is not necessarily, I think, our normal thing. Like we kind of pile contemplation on top of listening a lot of times, or roll those two together. So this listening stage is really about just being open to new information. And he said that that's often, traditionally, that means listening in person to a qualified teacher. And then the second stage of contemplating is really about coming to understand that. And this relates to the Buddha's instruction to us to examine the teachings for ourselves and make sure that we see their truth organically and as it applies to our own lives. And then, and that has to be an honest appraisal. It has to be personal and it has to be honest. And what I mean by personal is like thinking about it in terms of our own situation and our own experiences. And by honest, I mean not going that blind faith route, like really examining and maybe allowing ourselves to connect with some of the doubts that we might try to kind of sweep under the rug, to actually bring those into the light and examine the teachings with those. And then when we get to the meditating stage, that's where we put that aside, or not aside, but we stop engaging with the details and we just meditate. And that's interesting that that's like the actually cooking the meal part, right? So we're actually just meditating, and that's what helps us to prepare this dish that we want to experience the fruition of, which in this case would be enlightenment. So let's do that. You know what, before we even do it in terms of the 4 thoughts, does anyone have, just in terms of like contemplating that, does anyone have questions or ideas about any of that they've been thinking or anything?
So when you get
Yeah.
yeah, when you get into the meditation state of it, like don't think about it at all, just do your regular meditation. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what does that do? Like,
I think of it, the way I've come to understand it is that, through meditating, we come to know what's actually going on. In a very basic level, we just start to learn what's happening in our mind. But on a broader level, we're learning about our true nature. We're getting a better understanding of our potential, of the actual ultimate situation. We're getting a better experience of that, which is said to be non-dual. And so that being the case, we kind of need to leave all the dualistic thinking behind. So what I've come to think of it as is it's kind of like listening is just kind of taking it in. Contemplating is maybe examining the waves on the ocean, like that wave and then that wave and this wave, and is that one going this direction or that one's going that direction. So we're actually examining each of those little swells of information, which is in itself a manifestation of the ultimate truth. But then when we get to this meditation side, it's not like we're completely leaving behind what we've thought about. We're just letting those waves recede back into the ocean and just kind of resting in the ocean itself. That's one of the ways. Does that help a little bit? That's kind of how I've come to think about it.
yeah, totally.
Good.
Lama Adam, I'm interested again to go through the contemplation stage. Is it like for you, like an inner dialogue where you, like, let's say you read out one of the 4 thoughts in the beginning, and then do you go through, in essence, different versions to approach it? Is that the kind of thinking you do? Because for me, when I try to do that, it feels very much like sort of normal brain stage rather than a meditative stage where I'm also easily get distracted because I go from one to the next to the next. So what
And that
Mhm.
and that is kind of the danger, because getting kind of mired in opinion and conceptuality, and that's kind of our habit already. So that is something to be alert about, is if that we're not drifting off into just discursive thinking. And we can do that by kind of treating, I mean, this is a form of analytical meditation in a way. I can't say that that's like what the sutras say. I just have to, that's my opinion. This is kind of like, because we're placing our attention on the idea, and then we're going to examine it. And so there are ways of, for instance, when we contemplate the four thoughts, I love Taisitu Rinpoche's framework of review, recognize, resolve. So this may not work with every concept in Buddhism, but for instance, with like the four truths, or I'm sorry, the four thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma, we're going to review an idea, really kind of just going over the idea in our head again. So if we heard a teaching, we'll maybe kind of recall that teaching and review it a little bit until we get to a point where we recognize that it's true. Hopefully, we'll get to this point where, and I always say it's kind of like something flips, like not like fully, like nothing like flips totally over, but there's like, when you kind of, a machine or something, when you kind of click and it clicks into place, there'll be some sort of feeling that's beyond just where we started, where we kind of go, oh, okay, all right. And maybe just a little bit more, but we've come a little bit further in understanding it and recognizing its truth. And then, so there's 3 R's there. So there's review, recognize, and resolve. And so like with the four thoughts, the idea is that once you hit that recognition, that's where you're heading. Like there's no need after that recognition to continue to examine. You're doing it to get to the point where you recognize its truth, and then that recognition of the truth is the basis upon which you make a resolution to practice the Dharma, or to, if it's like impermanence, to always remember things are impermanent and do the practices that can help us more skillfully navigate impermanence. So that's maybe a little more specific to like the practice of the four thoughts, but another way to think about contemplation is like this is contemplation. He actually mentions in the book like Q&A sessions in a Dharma talk is a form of contemplation. And similarly, I actually think this would be an interesting question to ask Lama Karma or someone, but I actually think that contemplation can make a positive appearance in our discursive thinking as well. I mean, we're going to do a fair amount of that anyway. So if we just happen to be on the bus or somewhere else and we're kind of thinking about something unrelated, and then, karma pops into our mind, like that's, I think, a really good time to just engage in a little bit of contemplation about that. So he gives a pretty broad description of what contemplation could be, but he finishes by saying it's really meant to be a personal thing. So like this kind of a thing is good, but really we should also at some point be doing this on our own, and in a way, maybe even kind of debating ourselves. Like when I first started engaging with this, I did it from the angle of, can I disprove this stuff? Okay, like I'm inclined to believe a whole lot of this stuff, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't examine things thoroughly, like the Buddha said, like really test it out. I may want to think somebody's selling me gold because I like them, but it's best for me to really test it, primarily because that's what brings us to that little snap into place of recognition. Takes us a little step further when it's like, oh yeah, okay, and then that is a more solid foundation for more like things like devotion and faith that come up that are maybe a little bit slipperier than concepts, you know, but at the same time, beneficial and useful. There's actually something underneath them at that point, some kind of grounding. You know, we've come to the place where we have a reason, you know, a good reason to generate things like devotion. So, so there's a lot of ways contemplation could take on all kinds of forms, but I mean, you bring up a good point. Is it can just become like regular kind of discursive thinking. But if we're thinking about the topic and testing the topic and applying it to ideas in our life, you know, like karma, thinking about karma could be examining what happens when we keep our good habits, and what happens when, you know, maybe they have those good habits go away for a couple days, or similarly, like something we maybe do now that we aren't proud of, you know, like some kind of bad habit, or something we wish that we could break. What was that like when we started doing it? And for instance, did we, like a lot of times when we start doing a thing, we'll kind of remember that first time, or the first several times, or the period when we started doing a thing, because we're very mindful of it, because it's new. We're doing a new thing. But you can see the more often you do stuff, usually the more forgetful we get about it, the less mindful we get, and the more that just becomes ingrained habit, inertia kind of energy. And so having that sort of an examination, if you can think of a specific instance in your life where you started doing a thing, and examining it and seeing how cause and effect plays out there, helps to increase a genuine confidence in the teaching that belongs to us, you know, not anybody else. Like that's our story, and we're seeing in our own life this mechanism that we've heard described in a very general way from teachers and in you know, writings. It makes it our own. And I think ultimately we trust ourselves more than anyone else usually. And I know that's true when we're in arguments, right? Because we're the ones who are right. So we can convince ourselves, you know, through examination of these things. That's the strongest way to have some confidence in them. That's long-winded, but did I get there? Okay. So that was good. Let's take a minute and meditate. So to be specific, let's do some shamatha, because that's a practice where we're about as non-conceptual as we can be with a basic meditation practice, just placing the attention on the breath and bringing it back to the breath if we get distracted. And we'll do that for 3 or 4 minutes. Let's examine the fourth thought in the four thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma, the defects of samsara. And the reason I want to go to that one, aside from just time, is that one of the things Rinpoche makes a point about in this teaching from Excellent at the beginning is that, well, first of all, he says that enlightenment is not inevitable, which is really interesting because I've been having an ongoing conversation with somebody about exactly this, who kind of has the opinion that we're just all going to get there no matter what. And so it was funny when I got just a couple of days ago and I looked at this, I was like, yes. So, but hey, that's probably selfish of my part. But yeah, so he said it is not inevitable. We have to put forth the effort and exercise these methods if we want to make this happen. But if we do, then it is inevitable. So it is inevitable that these qualities, these innate qualities, will gradually arise. It's a misconception, he says, that meditation works quickly. So we have to be ready for things to happen on a gradual time scale. He also points out it's a misconception to think that like we have to arrange our whole life to be a perfect meditation environment. And in fact, we have to be able to apply it in every way we can, in every part of our life, however that's possible. We have to discover the ways in doing that. But the point here being that like if we are listening with openness, contemplating carefully, and meditating on, we will progress upon the path, and that will make it easier for us to do more things that support our practice, like reduce our attachment to worldly things and worldly activities. I think that's always tough when we read Dharma teachings about things we should and shouldn't do that maybe don't align with our current activities. So it's comforting to me to know that there'll be more of a natural inclination for those things, even with just some listening, contemplation, and meditation. Those things will more naturally arise anyway. So we don't have to kind of be Buddha immediately. It's rarely possible, and as we all know, we're mostly noticing, I think, how short we're coming of that from that goal. But like you said at the beginning, we all have that same capacity. So I think this would be a good reason to contemplate this idea of the defects of samsara and this idea that we need to generate some amount of renunciation for the things of this life. And there's lots of ways of thinking about that. The traditional ways are thinking about like birth, aging, sickness, and death, seeing how those things impact our life or will impact our life. The other four are not getting what we seek, fear of losing what we have, being separated from what is dear, and encountering what we do not want. But I wanted to bring up one thing in particular, which is a really poignant thing Khenpo Rinpoche said at Columbus KTC, I think in 2011. It was really eloquent, and I'm going to do nothing like that. But he basically said that we spend this life investing so much of our time in service of this body. And so many of our activities and so much of our time is devoted to meeting what we perceive as like the needs of this body, or beautifying this body, taking extra special care of this body. And all of that is generating karma. And it's tragic that the body doesn't go with us into the next life, that karma does. All that karma that we invested in service of taking care of this body, that's what's going on into future lifetimes with us. And that to me was one of the most impactful reasons to kind of think, contemplate on what's so great about all this that I think is so great in this worldly life. I'm still heavily invested in this worldly life, but that helped me chip away at a bit of that. So any thoughts about samsara? And yeah, go ahead.
So was he saying like don't care about what you eat, like don't try to be healthy? Is it we're spending too much time on, like, let's say that, or
Give your or
more like the beauty thing, like makeup and whatever, cutting your hair, stuff like that? That's more of that, or
I think it's more of that, but but a lot of the 3-year retreat was more of the first part than I was comfortable with a lot of times.
Okay.
So there is a fair amount of, we really don't need, I read a couple teachings in the last couple days about this kind of thing, and Dzongtsar Khyentse Rinpoche, Karma Kagyu Rinpoche, Taisita Rinpoche, like they all mention things that make me go like, well, that too, like going to the fitness center is one that Dzongtsar Khyentse Rinpoche mentioned. And I think we can all name some really good reasons why it's probably good to go work out, and keep your cardio fitness good, and maybe one of them relates to the first of the 4 thoughts, the precious human birth, So there's always going to be some balance that needs to be struck. But I think more than anything, he meant things that, were, when we talk about karma and like tainted karma, we're talking about karma that's generated because of attachment to the self. So, so maybe that's something to maybe that's a good discussion point. Is it selfish to do things that help us be healthy when our motivation is to benefit other beings? Or are we telling ourselves that that our motivation is benefiting other beings because it makes it easier to do the things to take care of ourselves?
Yeah, good one.
I'm sure it's a mix,
I'll think about it when I'm walking.
Yeah. Where I've landed with that is just doing more mantra is a really easy one, if I'm gonna exercise, I can do mantra while I exercise or walk or things like that. At least then I'm bringing some kind of balance to the situation,
Yeah. It's a good idea.
But definitely the other one would be like, you really can do anything for the benefit of beings when you make that the aspiration. Keep it in mind while you're doing the thing, and then dedicate the merit at the end. So there's also that,
Or think about the birds when you see the birds, or whatever.
Yeah. Tell me more. I love that because I love thinking about the animals when I see them. What do you do?
Me too. Yeah, because I hear birds and I hear, crickets and things like that. So maybe I should think about them when I'm doing my walk, like my workout walk. Yeah, that's a good idea. Like wish them no pain or something like that.
Yeah. I always say like, let's take care of each other until we get there to enlightenment, buddy. Like whatever animal it is I'm seeing, or
I like it.
I always try to like explicitly say like, we're in this together. We can do this.
That's great.
Madam, it sounded to me what you were saying, what Khenpo Rinpoche was saying, it sounded to me more like not saying don't do any exercise, don't do walks, don't do things for the body. It sounded more like the awareness of how much you do for the worldly things versus the other part, to get a concept of how much time you spend and how much effort you spend in doing all the other things, and how maybe little time you spend to do the things for the benefit of ourselves and other beings, I think. And that was my interpretation, not saying like, oh no, don't do exercise now because it's distracting you from your past. I think it's more like saying like, just see it like, you know, how much effort you can easily put into these things without thinking too much about it, and how difficult it seems, at least for me, to put effort into the other part very often.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there for sure. Yeah, I think that's probably the case, because it is skewed. You know, it is like off balance, and our simply describing what we're doing is generating more awareness and clearing away ignorance. So waking up to what we're doing and why we're doing it is just the fundamental part of what we're doing. So yeah, I think that's probably true.
So it's a form of mindfulness.
Say more.
Well, I make a definite effort to exercise. But I think the issue here is partially one of intent. I'm not exercising to exercise. I'm exercising because I will be better at my job. I'll have more patience. I'm pretty much a caregiver now, so that's very, very helpful. And I wish I could get more of it. Of course, but the intent is, you know, it makes me better at what I do, which includes the mindfulness of you know, do I come home and do I look at news on my iPad, or do I, you know, realize, thinking of the first time you did something you regret, and that's become a habit, and realize that you've blown off all the time you had to meditate, or, you know, coming home, not being quite so tired, being a little bit more energetic, and able to generate the mindfulness to say, wait a minute, I don't want to do this. This is my opportunity to sit. So I really think the intent steers the karma in a positive direction.
Yeah, I would agree. Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else want to make a comment?
I do. I don't
Yeah.
know. This just came to me, but like putting the oxygen mask on first, like in the airplane. When they say put the oxygen mask on first before you can help, you know, anybody else.
Yeah.
I don't know why that came to me. Let's just see.
No, I like that one, because that's why in a lot of, that's always my answer when people say like, how is meditating helping other people?
Right.
You know, like I mean, the easy answer is building our patience and our compassion. And that's one of the other things Rinpoche said in this teaching, you know, that like that naturally, you know, causes us to be more capable of being present and helpful and skillful with others, and makes us less likely to make mistakes.
Mhm.
So yeah.
And
I
I'm a
agree.
big contemplator. I contemplate, like I'll see something or something out of a book, and I'll just spend a week in contemplation on that one passage. Or if something's happening, I'm a big contemplator. I'll think about it and really contemplate, but I don't really do the other part, which is a lot of the meditate, which I know I should be doing. I'm more in my contemplation. So I'd probably have to work on the meditation part a little bit more,
Yeah.
a lot
I
more,
think
a lot
I'm
more.
I'm in the same boat. So
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Jody, you had mentioned, I remember, I'll never forget, because when I walk, sometimes I think about what you said, that walking can be kind of a type of meditation, I guess.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, anything can really. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that I've just come to understand that better just in the last couple of years, because I had a conversation with someone on a podcast last year about like mindfulness and playing music. And I know that I've seen like studies where they do fMRIs on people's brains while they perform their jobs, and like athletes and surgeons and stuff, like they light up more than most, but musicians light up more than anyone, like in terms of like brain activity happening, because there's just so many things you're thinking about, like what note you're playing, what's coming next. You're listening to the other person. You're thinking about the whole song. You're thinking about loud and soft. I mean, there's just so many things happening at the same time. And in that conversation, I was a little stumped. I was like, well, I don't know if you can like actually practice mindfulness in the midst of such a busy multitasking type of situation. But I've come to think you really can. And in fact, it's kind of like, have you ever seen like, I guess like when you actually like, when you're looking at something, like there's actually a number of like how big the area is you actually see when you look at something. I can't remember the number, but it's like a tiny space is all you're actually looking at. And then the rest your mind kind of fills in for you. And so you may be able to see it now, like you can kind of see the whole room, but there's really only one person's head maybe that you're looking at right now. And so I think similarly, like when we multitask, I had a professor asking me about this the other day, because he was saying, we were doing a meditation lesson thing, and he was saying, well, I lead these group discussions, and I think I'm actually pretty good at it. And is the Buddhist view that we shouldn't multitask, because when I lead these group discussions, I'm listening to the individual, I'm thinking about where I might lead the question. You know, there's all these kind of levels and or layers that are going on. And I said, I think that the Buddhist view is that you should know when you're multitasking. And I think that usually we don't really notice. And so I think that I don't think the Buddhist view is don't multitask. I think it is like be fully aware when you are, and recognize that in fact most of the time we don't notice our multitasking. And the more we're actually aware of it, in any case, we're only placing our attention in one place. We're only seeing that little bit. But at the same time, we're aware of the whole environment around it, which is, you know, a lot just like shamatha. You know, you place your attention on something, but you may hear sounds and you may have thoughts, and those are not a problem. You know, you may actually switch over to a different support. You may be using your breath, but then there's a truck backing up and it's beeping. And like you can actually just shift your attention to that for a little while. You know, if it's going to be loud and, you know, the kind of the most obvious thing, you can move your attention over there and make that the focus of your mindfulness. And so I think it's similar with everything. Like I really think like you can do it anywhere. It may be moving that focal point a lot, but hopefully you've built the skill to be able to do that smoothly and with awareness, you know.
Made me think when you were talking about music, I have this experience only really in driving very clearly that at some point you realize you're doing all these things on the road, you're driving, and I realize that I don't have to think about it. And I think that's maybe the moment of awareness, I guess, that you sort of see the machine working. And I think that isn't it a similar experience, like when you play music, you can also get to the stage, you say you have all those thoughts about, you know, what's coming next, blah, 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 what do I have to do now, but also it flows at a certain stage. And maybe that's the point where you have this, the short awareness of that it sort of, it comes, the machine is working, but you're aware that it's working rather than being in it and going like, oh, I have to do this now next. Don't let me get distracted. You know, I think that's maybe that's the moment. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. And I think there's also probably some kind of connection to an ultimate truth kind of idea there too.
Mhm.
That we can just rest in an awareness of what's going on, even while everything's going on. You
Mhm.
know, like we can actually just be present and active. Like Buddha activity happens spontaneously.
Mhm.
And sometimes we actually find ourselves in a situation where we're acting spontaneously too, which makes sense because we're Buddha. So it actually makes complete sense. Well, let's meditate for a minute. Then we'll have some more time. We can still talk some more, but I'd like to kind of make these a complete cycle. it's, did anyone else feel that like release? And that's why, it's one of the reasons why I think that's such an important part, because it's the conceptuality that we're always getting bound up in. And especially because, I mean, there's beneficial reasons to understand things and figure things out, but as long as we're thinking dualistically, you know, we're not actually resting in the nature of mind. So there's a part of this process of listening, contemplating, and meditating that is engagement with our conceptuality. There's a part of it that's openness, but I think that that meditation aspect is really, I mean, it's just crucial, because that's where we actually just kind of let go and rest, and we need that. So,
Yeah.
any other? Yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, it felt nice. I usually don't sit in the evening, and felt nice where I had a few moments where I just seemed to let go of everything and felt good.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't usually meditate like close to bedtime, but I used to, and like this is making me think like it's probably a great way to kind of release the day. I might have to work that back into my schedule. Any other questions or thoughts?
There's Bokar Rinpoche has a little pocketbook. It's out of print. It's called The Day of a Buddhist Practitioner.
Oh,
And he talks about when you're washing dishes, you know, you contemplate, may I wash away all beings' sufferings. And when you're walking, may I walk all beings to enlightenment. And to have all these, you know, little, let's say, slogans for while you're going about your normal day. And so you can at least be, I think the point is to be thinking of all beings, right? I mean, we need to do this mental judo with ourselves and turn that, instead of hitting that enemy that's coming at us in the nose with our fist, we just let it move by us and then grab that arm and swing it around. And so in a flowing way, yeah, use our, you know, turn our discursive thoughts into something where we're thinking about all beings.
I love that. And I think that's a great practice of like just making everything you do, thinking about it, like Bruce was saying in terms of intention, like making that explicit, you know, thinking of how you want to, and if you could do it in a poetic way, that's even more fun. You know, if it's water, you're washing something away. If it's light, you're, you know, eliminating the darkness of ignorance, those kinds of things, you know. I don't know if this is entirely, this is related, but I think it was Rinpoche, one of the Rinpoche said at some point, and I think this is worthwhile, that we should think about what Buddha we want to be. Meaning, like, if you look at like the names of the Buddhas, there's like the Buddha of infinite light, and you know, the stainless Buddha of you know, there's just all these different names. So like, just think about maybe what you would want your Buddha name to be, you know, and that maybe helps to start to kind of frame activity too.
Yeah, that's funny. It reminds me of the meme I've seen on Facebook. It's like, if you were a rock band, the name of your rock band would be the color of your shirt and the last food you ate, you know?
Oh.
But instead of that, it's like, you know, what Buddha will you be?
I want to be the Buddha of perfect analogies. That's what I decided.
Oh, nice. Wow. Yeah.
So next time we'll check in. I want to hear some Buddha names.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
Like one of the current Buddhas, like green Tara or like that, or you make a Buddha.
Make up your own.
Yeah.
Oh, make
Yeah,
up your
like-
own. Okay.
Yeah, I think of it as kind of like taking it in a way. It's like taking appearance and emptiness and uniting them in the sense that like we have our appearance of who we are and we have our seeming set of preferences, and so can we make that in that judo way? Can we make that into an enlightened aspiration, enlightened quality? You know.
Yeah, I like it.
So like Max, who's does animation, he could be the Buddha of animated awakening.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to think about animation when I get enlightenment.
Lisa,
That's the furthest thing from me.
Lisa could be the
No.
Buddha of painted perfection.
Oh, painted perfection.
You like painting, right?
Oh, yes. I thought you were going to mention the IT stuff. Yes, painting. Yes.
But you can see with mine, like it sounds wonderful to say like the Buddha of perfect analogies, but like what I'm really saying is like I always want to explain stuff to people, and that's not necessarily a good quality either. But I can turn it around into this, you know.
Yeah, you're right. But that's a teaching. What you just, right? It's called teaching, right? Explain.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully. I the people who are closest to me may not always want to hear the things I have to say about this stuff.
Yeah. Always, always. They never want to.
Hmm.
Anything else?
I have a question. It's maybe taking a step back a little bit. In his teaching, Khenpo Sanjay is teaching on Gampopa at the moment through KTD. And I don't know if he got this from Gampopa, but in one of the first classes, he said that the amount of time that people should spend on study versus practice was different depending on their faith and their devotion. So like if you already have a lot of devotion and want to practice, that maybe you can spend less time on study, or vice versa. If he said basically, I guess that the purpose of study was to develop a devotion to practice. And I guess it kind of, like, I really like to study. So I don't like, I want to practice and I want to like to practice, but I also want to study. And I wasn't sure too if he's not really taking questions. But do you know if that means like this sort of listening and reflecting? Like, is that the kind of study? Or, because it seems like you kind of would need to do all three until you're a Buddha. But I'm not sure. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably do, to some degree, need to do all three. But like you said, I think the more you have a natural inclination towards the practice, the less you need to study. And I know it being the practice lineage, the Kagyu, like I've heard teachers say that study is for when you're sick, meaning like too sick to practice. So like that's one extreme view on the situation. But I mean, I think the point there is that like it's always more beneficial to practice. But we know even as meditators and as people who are connected with the teachings that we're a lot more tuned in to getting our teeth brushed and putting our deodorant on than we are meditating. You know, like we understand, we have like a very palpable understanding of what it's like if we go somewhere without brushing our teeth and what that's like for people and us. But we just keep forgetting like what it's like if we don't meditate, you know. So clearly we have to have some kind of conceptual basis and some natural understanding of why we have to do this stuff. So for a while I was trying to say that at the beginning of every talk. I probably should start again, that like everything I'm talking about here is really just to get you to practice, because and to get me to practice. So because I think that and I think I may be giving the talk I gave here at Santa Monica last month at KTC on Sunday. I haven't quite decided yet, but I talked, I think, a lot about what you're asking, Caitlin, like in terms of like what conceptual fixation in addiction can become, you know, and how to just kind of more skillfully balance that. I mean, this is one way of balancing it, but it's tricky, right? Like we get I think we can get a little hooked on facts and ideas and really that means like duality and concepts, and that's kind of synonymous with samsara. And so a lot of what Dharma is utilizing samsara and our tendencies for dualism in order to overcome that. So I mean, that's really what we're doing is using what we've got, which is this attraction for conceptuality and this language of conceptuality in order to kind of not catapult out of it, but see between the lines, you know, see the actual nature of what's going on. So like another example is in Rinpoche's teaching in this book, he mentions that like some people think they need to stay at the beginning stage for like a whole lifetime. And other people think in the beginning that they should go right to the advanced practice. But he talks a lot about how like there has to be a progression. And sometimes we have to move on from things, you know, and I think ideally we're moving towards more meditation. And that's one good reason why we have all these methods, because for instance, if one does have a particularly strong affinity for you're chanting, you're visualizing, you know, there's detail, there's all this stuff going on. That's another great reason that we have practices like that, is because they're just rich with detail, but they're that judo thing of flipping it into virtuous and skillful ways of utilizing that conceptuality. So yeah, I think you're not alone, I think, in feeling that way, because yeah, I think just one little bit of advice is I think it's always helpful when we want to read, like maybe 1 out of 4 times sitting instead. It's a good way to start, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like, yeah, I guess so in theory, if one is able to, it would be better to always practice.
That's
Is-
what
is
I've heard.
what you were
Yeah.
saying. Okay. All right.
Yeah. I mean, that with the caveat of you know, working with a teacher and making sure you're practicing in an effective way, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know you've got the conditions for that. So yeah.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, I personally, I'm still sort of so new to everything. I feel like I need to give myself a frame. Like, I don't know, like I like to practice and I'll do that, but I don't know, it still feels like the study and the filling in sort of the missing pieces about what is exactly going on makes the practice more beneficial sometimes.
And it does. Yeah. And only you can really kind of titrate that balance,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, we should probably wrap up. So I want to say thank you, you guys, and I hope I said only things that are helpful and accurate tonight. And if I didn't, I confess any errors. And that I rejoice in all the teachings of the lineage masters and all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and may all of our teachers stick around for a long time and continue to teach. And with that said, let's dedicate the merit of our time here tonight. By this merit, may all beings obtain the omniscience of Buddhahood and defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may we free all beings. May we free all beings. May we free all beings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lama.